He wasn't afraid to die. The first time Raptor had looked down the barrel of a gun was when he was 7. There were only a handful of memories before that one, all covered with that hazy sunlight of childhood when his mother had still managed to protect him from what his world was really like. The memory of that night, when he was 7 though, was as clear as cellophane. There were only a few electric lights in the house he grew up in. Logically, he knew it was probably dark, but there might as well have been a spotlight on the memory as brightly as it burned. It was an old revolver. The gangs that his father messed around with didn't exactly have top-of-the-line gear. So when they raided his house to take his father away that night, they used a ramshackle collection of cheap modern rifles and old pieces that had found their way into Kenya throughout the past decades. He wished he knew exactly what sort of revolver it had been. He'd have liked to have one for himself, a sort of memento for the days when he had a painfully short childhood and another name. "What's your name, kid?" the gun wielder had asked. His younger twin brothers, only 3, huddled in the corner of the room, whimpering. It was too easy to cry, and the tears ran down his face like rain. "Roderick." "Well, Roderick, I have no plans on shooting a damn kid tonight. As long as everyone plays their parts, you'll get out of this just fine, okay?" He nodded, the top of his nose brushing the iron barrel and making him cry harder. Another man had stopped in the doorway, also armed, looked in on the scene, and nodded before yelling up the hallway. "We've got your kids. You know how this works. Let's go, and we leave them alone." They led his father out of the house with zip ties on his wrists. The man holding the gun on Roderick had lowered the revolver and patted him on the shoulder awkwardly. "Good luck, kid." And then they were gone. He never saw his father again, but he sure as hell saw a lot of guns. With 3 kids and no husband, his mom struggled to make ends meet. Their neighbors took pity on them for a time, and he was able to do odd jobs sweeping stoops and feeding animals, but eventually, that extra pocket change dried up. He couldn't stand to see his mom cry, or the hollow cheeks of his brothers. If the world wasn't going to give to him, then he was going to take. When he was small, he was able to get away with more things. No shopkeep was going to beat a skinny little kid like him. Plus, they didn't see him often. The worst was a slap on the side of the head that made his ears ring. He suspected that some turned a blind eye to him shoving bags of dry rice under his shirt, but he would never know for sure. Roderick fell in with a gang of his own at around 12. He was tall for his age and fast. It made his mother cry even more. But with his face covered and a shitty pistol, he was able to get cash. And even after the gang's cut, it went a lot farther than a bag of rice. That same year, Umbrell came to town. A titanium ore mine had existed on the edges of town forever, but either the Umbrell Corporation decided they needed the titanium, or they found something else in the earth that was worth their time. Either way, the local miners were thrown out, and Umbrell moved in, bringing machinery and enough workers to open a rift in the earth that boggled his mind. He remembered sitting on top of one of the neighboring buildings with a few friends, swinging his legs in the open air and watching the whole operation in awe. The soldiers and guards came next. No one could get close to the mine, and it was clear that the plan was to buy out most, if not all, of the town within the coming years. but for the time being, they stood on street corners in their olive green and sand brown uniforms, brand new rifles held in their hands. Terrifying at first, annoying in time. They weren't fans of the roving teenage gangs. He remembered the first time a soldier had grabbed him by the wrist and cranked it behind his back, making his fingers go numb and his own gun fall from his numb fingers. At first, he had been scared shitless, but after a few days he was mad. Roderick snuck into the Umbrell camp in the middle of the night, hoping to get his weapon back, and instead tried to slip one of their pistols out of the makeshift armory that had been set up. The officer who caught him was older, tall, and almost amused by the dirty kid trying to steal from one of the most powerful megacorporations in the world. He didn't report him that first time, nor the second or the third. Roderick had seen too much to stay away. The stores of obscene amounts of food, the weaponry, so much value in such a small place. How was he supposed to go back to emptying cash registers at corner stores when Umbrell's camp was right there? Later, he would come to realize that he only survived because they let him. Officer Rudo specifically let him live. It became a game between the officer and the teenage thief. If he did a good enough job getting into camp, the officer would still have him thrown out onto his ass, but a bag of goods would follow right after him. If he was hasty, well, he went hungry, and more often than not bruised. His fate changed one afternoon when the group that he ran with got into a scuffle with another gang. And like a moron, one of them fired off a shot. It didn't hit anyone, but the Umbrell soldiers on the nearby corner moved like magic. One moment they were standing there, relaxed, and the next they were in the middle of the skirmish, guns aimed. Roderick had searched the faces of them, and not seeing Rudo among them, decided that it wasn't worth sticking around. He tried to flee when the soldier grabbed him by the collar of his shirt. In trying to break free, he managed to land a half-hearted punch on the man's chin. And there was a moment of total silence around them before the soldier chuckled and hit Roderick in the temple with the butt of his rifle. On the ground, he saw stars and the slow drip of blood into the dirt from his split skin. The gunshot had brought more Umbrell soldiers, and one pushed through and knelt next to the boy. Officer Rudo asked, "You okay, kid?" He wasn't. Rudo had stood, yelling for whatever guard had found it necessary to concuss a 13-year-old. The punch that Rudo landed on the man's jaw was a lot more effective than the one Roderick had thrown. The next time he woke up, he was in the Umbrell hospital tent, his mom in the chair next to him, holding his hand. Rudo had come not long after and sat down in the chair on the other side of the bed, explaining to Roderick and his mother what was going to happen next. Roderick had drawn too much attention to himself, finally, and most of the time, nuisances would be dealt with quickly and brutally. But Rudo had seen something of himself in the boy and had a different fate in mind. "I'd never tell you this under normal circumstances," the man said, "but a few of those times you made it into camp, you were here for over 5 minutes before you were spotted. That's impressive. More than impressive. Unheard of. You're a little young, but I think I can make a case to bring you into the Umbrell fold. But if you agree, there's no going back." His mother protested, but Roderick didn't. Those next few years were rough, but he was safe. Roderick was fed, there was a roof over his head, and there was a routine. When he turned 16, he was able to help in the motor pool and earn a little bit of money when he wasn't training. He sent all of it back to his mother. Umbrell bought out his entire town eventually, and his mother was able to get a small, clean apartment in a neighboring city. At 21 years of age, Roderick became Raptor. At 25, he was pulled from his unit and assigned to the Eclipse Initiative team Ares under the command of Sentinel. At 31, a mutant soldier pressed a jet injector against the back of his gloved hand and forced death into his veins. He already felt his cells dying, splitting, and bursting as Aegis forced pills into his mouth. He remembered thinking he was melting from the inside out, his strength gone, his vision tunneling. The last thing he saw was the medic's pale face, her pupils blown wide in shock, and her stubborn jaw set. Then Sentinel and Hawkeye had lifted him, and he felt the slippage of his epidermis separating from the muscle where they grabbed him. And he knew no more. It was over 2 weeks later when he first came back to consciousness in the underground quarantine portion of Umbrell's hospital. Raptor only came to for seconds at a time at first. The agony was too razor-sharp and intense. The polonium had wrecked everything inside of him, but Umbrell had some tricks up their sleeves to rebuild even the most intricate of organs and bones. It was the worst thing he had ever lived through. He felt like that 7-year-old kid again, tears streaming down his face in the minutes of awareness, terrified. He wasn't afraid to die, but damn did he want to. Raptor prayed in the quiet to every god he could think of for release, but it never came. He fell apart and was put back together time and time again until the minutes of consciousness became hours and then days. There were the bright overhead lights of surgery, the liquid fire of things fed into his vessels. It was when the pain was dulled to a tolerable level that he knew he had changed. It was impossible to quantify, but he knew that something was different. It was in the way his limbs moved, the brightness of the colors around him, the glassy feeling of his skin when he went to scratch and itch. When it was clear he was going to live, the nurse and doctor started to speak to him like a person for the first time since he had woken up. But they wouldn't tell him what had been done. They would tell him they weren't the ones to explain it, and that soon enough, someone would be in to give him answers. All of the days were the same, until finally they weren't. "You've got your team coming in to visit today," his nurse had told him. Joy flared brightly. His team. They were still his team. "But first, we've got someone coming in to explain some of the procedures that were done to get you back to this point." He turned his head at the swish of the door opening, and a short man in a white lab coat entered. One side of his face, the pink of new scar tissue, and an eye patch covering an empty socket. He was familiar, but Raptor couldn't place him. The man smiled, his mouth only pulling upwards on the unscarred side. "Good morning, Sergeant. My name is Howard Brighton, and I work with biosynthetic research. We've met once before." He tilted his head as he looked Raptor over, and the smile grew. "It's time for us to have a very long conversation."